Hey everybody, on today's show I've got Bryan Sweet. Bryan is the CEO at Sweet Financial, and we talk about some really cool stuff. We talk about the mentors in his life, particularly his Uncle Roy, Bryan's need to be independent and what that means to him, the unfortunate fact that most people spend more time planning their vacation than they do planning for their retirement, and what he does to help people move past that with his dream architecture process. I know you're going to like Bryan, so here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. So happy to have you here. And I'm so excited to have Bryan Sweet with me. Bryan, welcome to the show.
So glad to be here, Mike.
So and I was telling Bryan before we started, he's been very flexible with his schedule with me. I'm normally like clockwork. And I think 2 times I had to change. The last one was last week or the week before because I had COVID for the second time. And it's so hard to put these things together sometimes that, but you always have to have flexibility, and he certainly showed it. So Bryan, thank you so much for that.
You're very welcome, and I'm just glad you're feeling better.
Thank you. And I did also have the opportunity of episode 278. I did a podcast with Bryan's partner, Brittany Anderson. So if you want to learn more about Brittany and you didn't get that episode 278, I think you'll really like that one as well. So this is sort of my second Sweet podcast, and I'm looking forward to it. So let me tell you a little bit about Bryan so that you can get as excited as I am about what's going to happen here. So Bryan is a wealth advisor, and he's really at the top of his game. He's a Forbes Best-in-State Wealth Advisor for multiple years running. He's been on a mission to help people live their retirement dreams since the start in financial services, which goes back quite a ways, back to 1979 or so. And it's because of this that he created his proprietary process, which is called the Dream Architect. Love the name of that, by the way, Bryan.
Thank you.
And the Dream Architect not only helps his clients maximize their distribution planning in retirement, which I'm assuming that means what you end up with, Bryan, or is there a different meaning to distribution that people should know?
Yeah, it's like, how do you get your normalized cash flow when you're not getting a paycheck from work, and just making sure that you're taking it from the right areas, taking into consideration taxes and all of the interesting IRS rules and regulations when it comes to things like 401ks, et cetera.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. So the Dream Architect not only helps clients maximize their distribution planning in retirement, but also helps them strive for and accomplish their biggest dreams. And dreams is going to be a big thing here. It's one of the names in his process. And I really want to get into this whole retirement dream thing, or living the life you dream thing, because it's sprinkled throughout all the stuff I read about Bryan, and I'm just interested in learning more about that. Bryan is also partnered in multiple entities, including Ultimate Advisor Coaching and the Elite Wealth Advisor Symposium. Both of those support high-performing financial advisors across the United States in the growth and scaling of their business. So as I get that, you're not only helping your direct clients, the clients of your firm, but you're also helping the whole industry sort of up their game. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it.
Okay, cool. He and his partners do this through teachings on team engagement, marketing, automation, best practices, and all that it takes to build a high-class and scalable advisory practice. And when you get right down to it, Bryan thrives on helping others experience the growth and freedom that he has created in building a world-class financial services practices of his own, all while living the life of his dreams. Bryan is the author of a couple of books. The latest, I believe, is Dare to Dream, Design the Retirement You Can't Wait to Wake Up To, which I think is a great name. I don't know if you came up with that subtitle, but it's a good one. You can find out more about Bryan, or you can connect with him on LinkedIn, Bryan Sweet, Sweet. And then his firm is sweetfinancial.com. Bryan, I start every episode with a simple question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Well, I don't think it was any one thing, Mike. I think it was a series of scenarios that played out over my life that I was fortunate to listen and believe in some mentors. And so I think it probably started back when I was a little kid, to be honest with you. And my mom and dad probably fortunately got divorced when I was 3. And because of that, I got to spend some time with my uncle, who owned an implement dealership, and I got to spend summers with him. And I think my initial interest in maybe entrepreneurship and whatnot came because of him. And he was just this gregarious, really fun-loving guy, and everybody loved my Uncle Roy. And I learned, how to treat people, relationship building, and just, I think I got my interest in business from him. And then as time went on, I had a mentor in college who was kind of a marketing guy, and he helped me make some decisions and got me in the industry initially. And so if it wasn't for him and me listening to things that he said, because my mom was probably a little upset when I first made my announcement of what I was going to do when I got out of college. And he was also a district manager for a life insurance company. And since I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, I said, well, I'll just give that a try. And fortunately, then that led to other things, but kind of scared the bejeebas out of my mother that, got to 4 years of college and I was going to be a life insurance agent. And then when I got into the financial services area, I had a great mentor. He was the CEO of our broker dealer. And after one meeting, we were sitting down and having a kind of a leisurely conversation. And I had always done pretty well. I was maybe in the top 10% of all the advisors. But that particular night, he was sitting with me and he looked at me and said, Bryan, I just wanted you to know that I think you could be one of the top representatives of our firm. And I think what happened is I actually believed him. And within a year, I was in the top 10 of 8,200 advisors around the country. So that was an interesting scenario. And then just more recently, as you alluded to, Brittany Anderson, who's my partner in another business, which we do call Dare to Dream. And that we'll talk a little bit more. It's got talking about the dream architect life we're creating. But Brittany's been an amazing resource for me because sometimes it gets a little lonely in your office when you are the visionary and whatnot. And Brittany's got this uncanny ability to be a visionary, but she's just a great people person. So I get to interact with her literally daily. And I think she keeps me motivated. And then I'm also just a lifelong learner. So I've been a member of Strategic Coach Dan Sullivan's organization for 23 years. And then more recently, a mastermind called Genius Network. And by being in those, I've really met some amazing people and was able to take information from different industries and apply it to what we do. Subsequently, written 5 books and all sorts of crazy things, started 4 other businesses just because of, commentary and inspiration I've gotten from others. So that's a long answer to the short question, Mike, but I don't think it was any one person.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, you laid down a lot of paths there, and I want to explore a couple of them if you don't mind. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So your parents divorced when you were 3. It sounds like you were raised by your mother. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, my mom, she's kind of in a memory care unit today, which is, a little sad, but yeah, she raised me since I was 3. I got to see my dad one time since they got divorced, and that was at his mom's funeral. And he actually left early from that. So I know it's good that he wasn't part of my life because I'm 99.9% sure things wouldn't have turned out like they have had he been part of it, because he just really wasn't a good person. So yeah, my mom did a lot when I was young, and so hard to repay mothers, as we all know.
Sure, sure. It's easy to discount what they've done for you too.
Yeah, very much so.
I know I've done that in my life. So you said that she was not thrilled about the life insurance path. What did she want for you? What was she hoping for?
I don't know if she had any specific areas that she wanted me to go into. I had a big interest in accounting. I think what she wanted was something that had stability, because she probably in her own mind felt that she didn't have a lot. Come to find out, just doing some investigating as she has gotten older, the most she ever made was $10.32 an hour. And then my dad never paid her $1 worth of alimony. And, so I never felt like I was without anything, but she had to have sacrificed, an amazing amount for me not to feel like, I was missing something. So, it's just, when you start thinking back and, at the end of their lives, you start thinking a little bit more about all that stuff. Yeah. And, you really can't repay them enough for all they did and sacrificed.
And you were only child? Did mom ever remarry? Or?
Yep.
Okay.
Only child. Yep.
All right. And mom never remarried, or she did?
She
remarry?
did. She actually, about 3 months after I got married, she got remarried to a great human being that treated her like gold. And that was such a great thing to see. But
Hey, everybody, just a quick pause here to let you know how much I appreciate that you've made time for my podcast. If you're not already a subscriber, please become one today. Leave a review and tell a friend. Now, let's get back to the show.
Took a number of years. It was 22 years that she was single. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time. Huh. She sounds like an incredible person. These mentors, it's funny, like a lot of people attribute some part of the success in their life or to a mentor. And I find that a lot of people don't really know what that means. Like, for example, they understand what the word mentor means, but it's like, and you hear people say, well, find a mentor. And I often wonder if it's just someone people think, well, a mentor is just someone I look up to, or a mentor is someone who I actually have a relationship with that, imprints in me or on me something that would not have otherwise been imprinted. And it sounds like in your case, it was real engagement. And I wondered if you would mind taking us through, like with your uncle or with the other two gentlemen that you mentioned, like what was the relationship actually like, and what did you get from it, and what did you give to it? Like, if you could just reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, let's start with my uncle, because that was the earliest one. I would tell you that he probably served a little bit as a father figure to me, because I didn't have one. And, he was very kind, and I worked at his implement dealership. And I remember this to this day. We got to drive farm equipment out to the county fair. And, that was always the highlight of the year. And, he took me everywhere he went. He went to lunch, and he'd literally give you, the shirt off his back. But the one funny story about Roy is, and I'm just dead serious, every human being just loved him to death. And he was like the most gregarious guy. So, and I'll never forget this, but we used to go into this one local restaurant. It was called the White House. And he'd go in there for lunch, and he just knew everybody that was in there. And he'd go up and down the aisles before we would go to sit, and he'd say, hi, Bob, boy, those French fries look good. And he'd grab one and eat it. He said, well, I might have some of those today. And literally he'd like take a bite out of somebody's sandwich, and they didn't think anything bad about it, because that was just who he was, and they'd have a bunch of yucks with him. But he really knew how to handle people and become friends and create relationships. And it was just so noticeable how people were attracted to him because of him being outgoing and caring about others. And he always took care of his clients first. I can remember lots of stories about things he did for farmers that, just he went way out of his way, where he never made a dime, but he just cemented the relationship for somebody that maybe worked with him for 20 or more years. And, you just don't forget those things. And I think a lot of that applies to what I do today. I just have that in the back of my mind. Dick Ford, like I said, he was my college professor. Interesting story with that is, as time went on, I ended up being their financial advisor for him and his wife, and then all of their family members. And it's really interesting. I just had a client trip to Italy, and their whole family ended up going. And I wasn't able to participate, but I sent a couple of my staff people. But, we've just created this lifelong friendship where he helped me. Now he subsequently has passed away, and now I get to help his wife, maintain her lifestyle and her, ability to, she loves to travel. And so it's, kind of full circle there. But he was like the number one teacher at my college for 3 years running, and just learned a lot of skills, from just how to tie a tie to just, I want to say sales skills, but it was more just, once again, relationship skills and how to treat people, and, what to say and what not to say. So that was really helpful. And then Dick Averett, who was the president of our broker dealer. I would say I had it wasn't the closest relationship, just because he was, the top guy, and you'd see him at conferences. I had his phone number and things, and if you needed something, you had an open line of communication. But it wasn't like I had a lot of like daily interactions with him. But he was just a really caring guy, and if he saw something that or saw something in someone, including me, but he did this to others, he let you know that there was more in the gas tank than you were letting on. Because I think sometimes what happens is you need somebody to have belief in you before you believe in yourself. And I don't know what happened, but the timing from being pretty good to being much better, it all happened within a short period of time after he said that.
I think that's so true what you said there. Like it's oftentimes someone else has to have the belief in you before you believe it yourself. And it was interesting what you said, because when you first described that, you said, he said you could, be a top rep, and you believed him. That's what you said. I believed him.
Yeah.
And it's funny, because you may not have believed it before. He says that you believe it, but then once you believe it, you start acting toward it, right? You start acting as if this is inevitable, because this person has to be, right? Because this person believes in me. So they think I can do it. So I must do it. It's,
Yeah, it's, strange amount of circumstances there, but it was a real defining moment. And then, from there, it's just continued to get better, because now I always believe in myself.
Yeah. And Uncle Roy sounds like a real character, because that's not easy to pull that off, what you were just saying. Like to be the person, most people are going to come off as being jerky or something. That's what I think when they try to pull something like that off. But to pull it off and have people be like, wow, Roy just had one of my fries. That was hilarious, or whatever. That's a real skill.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the first time I saw it happen was a little more shocked, because I couldn't believe he was doing it, but that was just him. Every time we went to lunch, he did the same thing. So it was, but yeah, everybody just found that funny because of just who he was and how he handled himself.
And Bryan, when when you got out of college, we know where you went, at least the first direction. But what about when you were going in? What were you thinking about for you or as a career, or did you have an idea?
Yeah, I really didn't. I've always loved business and I've always loved numbers. So I got a minor in accounting, finance, business degree. And so wasn't quite sure. And when we were getting close to graduation or the senior year, I wasn't 100% sure of what I wanted to be when I grow up, if you will. And so when Dick said, well, if nothing else, why don't you try, and I did this during my senior year of college, being a life insurance agent. He said, worst case scenario is you'll get some really good experience. It'll look really good on your resume, and you'll have more, skills and things to share with a future employer than you did before. So I said, well, I don't have any other options to consider. So, I said, let's give that a whirl. And then just one thing led to another, and it kind of took off, and things progressed, and ultimately got out of the life insurance side of it because of certain things I didn't have control over. And I love the financial planning, wealth management side much more. But, if I wouldn't have taken those initial steps, I probably never would have gotten there.
And was a career like working for your uncle or taking over his business? Was that ever in the cards, or was that?
Oh, no, that actually never came up. He had some great business partners or people that worked there for years that ultimately took over. And except for the summer, I really didn't have any skill sets or anything. So, he obviously made the right decision there, because that company is still going strong today. And the people he sold it to have flourished with it. So he definitely made the right decision.
And and after college, you went and got a master's degree, I think, at the American College in Bryn Mawr, which is only interesting. Well, two reasons it's interesting to me. One, I'd never heard of it, and I grew up right near Bryn Mawr, so that. And then so I wondered how you found it. What was it, and how'd you find it?
So the American College, if you're in the life insurance arena, is well known for their designations and how you can learn and get better about the profession. So they've got the Chartered Financial Consultant designation, Chartered Life Underwriter, and then their top level, if you will, is the Masters of Science in Financial Services. So it's really a life insurance or financial services only college. So you probably wouldn't have heard of it unless you were in the industry, but it's typically people just in the insurance or financial planning arena that typically go to that. But you'll see CLU, CHFC after a lot of people's names on their business cards that are, in the life insurance industry.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. And speaking of those things, CLU, all these other designations, how, like most people see that and they don't have no idea what it is. What kind of what is it? I mean, what do they really teach you that puts you ahead of people who don't have that education, but are, what does it really bring you?
Yeah, I would tell you, it probably doesn't really give you anything except some advanced knowledge. And I think the thing that it probably does the most is it gives you some confidence that you maybe know more than your quote unquote competition does. And, the other part of the story is my aunt, Roy's wife, was a high school principal. And so I think, my wanting to be a lifelong learner came from her. And so that's why I belong to these masterminds. I'm in a couple of study groups and, gotten these advanced degrees, because I just want to feel myself that I know as much as I possibly can to help the people that we're working with. And so but most people never bring it up. If if they get your business card and you've got the initials after it, they never ask what it means, or, what advanced levels do you have that somebody else doesn't. So I think it's more of a personal thing myself.
Okay. It's probably like in the industry, it's probably meaningful too. Like someone sees someone that.
Yeah, I think if you were applying for a position and, you had those initials after your name, you would stand out from somebody that didn't, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on the lifelong learning front, you mentioned strategic coach. I've talked about strategic coach frequently on my podcast. I was a member for 6 or 7 years myself. But so people that are listening are familiar with that. But you also mentioned Genius Network, and I know what Genius Network is. I know who created it and stuff. But I've never been to Genius Network, and I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind telling us, like, what is Genius Network? What is it for you, and what has it done for you?
Yeah, Genius Network, I think initially, I've probably been a member for 6 years, something like that, with Genius Network, started by a gentleman by the name of Joe Polish, who probably is the most connected human being in the world. If you want to meet somebody that does anything, Joe probably knows them. But I think it started initially as like a more of a marketing, like how do you brand yourself and how do you market your firm better, and how do you use all of the fancy technologies to your advantage. But what I've seen is it's really developed into more of a, how do you become a better person in addition to all of the marketing things. And there's people from all over the world and every kind of industry, from healthcare to garbage collectors to builders to financial advisors. And I would say, strategic coach is how to become a better entrepreneur. But I would tell you, Genius Network, if I had to pick one thing that really forced me to really think bigger, it's been Genius Network, because I've written all my books since I've been a member of Genius Network. I've started all the additional companies since I've become a member of Genius Network. And so I think there's just something about the thought process that goes on, when you're with those people or at those meetings, that get you to think differently. And then I've been able to take a lot of different thoughts and ideas from people in those different industries and say, well, I love that concept. How can I apply it to what I do, to make what our industry better? And so we've been able to do, several of those things. And part of that is our new platform that we're coming out with here in 2023 called the Dream Architect Life, is really just because of conversations I've had with Genius Network and Strategic Coach people.
So I want to make sure that I've got this straight. You've been in this Genius Network for about 6 years, and during that time, you've written 5 books.
Yep.
And started 4 new businesses.
Yep.
All from the conversations or interactions or relationships that you've met at this.
Yep.
And what is it? Is it a regular throughout the year type thing, Bryan, or is it? I know there's a conference, but
every November they've got a 3-day conference where all the members get together. So it's the only time where probably everybody is going to be in one facility at one time. And then they have, I think, 9 monthly meetings. And one of the great things that's happened is when we had COVID, they were forced to, use Zoom as the platform. So they opened it up where literally you could Zoom in and or now go in person to all of the meetings instead of just 2. So you used to go to the annual event, and then you could go to 2 other meetings. So out of the 9 meetings, you could go to 3. Well, literally now, because of COVID, you could go to all 9. So you have a little more opportunity, assuming you had the time, to participate in a lot more than you otherwise could have.
Huh. Well, that sounds like an amazing accelerator. At least for you, it's been amazing.
Yeah, no, it's been really helpful. And, one of the things that I've found is unless you go to groups like that, those are the places where the people think differently. And the more you're with those kind of people, the more you think differently. And if you just hang around, nothing wrong with, say average people or people that aren't striving to do something exceptional, you kind of replicate the people you hang around with the most.
Right.
And so the more time you can spend with, out of the box thinkers or people like that, at least for me, it's amazingly motivated. I could spend 8-12 hours a day with those people. And at the end of the day, I got more energy than when I began with. But it's just, it just quite the atmosphere just for, thinking out of the box.
And why does that excite you? And I'm asking because, someone that's had sort of your level of success, you've been 40 years plus, doing what you love doing. And so let's take 6 years off of that, so 35 or so years of doing it. And this thing comes along and you're like, oh, I want to try that. And not only do you try it, but you have the kind of acceleration that we talked about. What's going on inside of you that makes you, because most people, I think, they might not, they might say, well, I don't need that. I've been doing this. It works great. I'm satisfied, all that stuff. So what's different about you?
Well, I think a little bit of it is I get bored with, things that you've done and you've been successful at, that's like repeating too much. So I like creating, I think.
Hey everyone, if you like what I'm doing with this podcast and want to participate in more of the things I'm thinking about and exploring, subscribe to my newsletter today. It's super simple. Just go to mikemalatesta.com right now, put in your email, and you will get the very next issue. It's short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.
Creating something that's better than what you were delivering today, or solving additional problems that exist that you haven't accomplished, but you see continually happening. And that's maybe the closer one to it. Is the longer I'm in it, I see other problems that people are having or clients are having, and I don't see somebody else maybe coming to the plate and answering that. So then, we've just said, well, maybe we can handle that. So our conference, our Elite Wealth Advisor Symposium, I've got a partner in that from Ohio, Randy Carver. And, for 5 or 6 years, we talked to each other. We were going to Barron's conferences and whatnot. And we'd go, like half or 3/4 of the material just wasn't applicable to us. And we'd go, well, God, maybe one day we'll create one that's got everything that people like us would want to attend. And we go to the next conference and we say it again. And then finally we just said, well, let's just do it. And, it was just a different conference and it's resonated and, that's taken off. And, like the Dream Architect, I did start that back through Strategic Coach. So Dan Sullivan helped me create that idea. But I found 4 other things that our clients were continually having issues with, that when they retired or even prior to that. And so I just said, well, I don't see anybody creating that. And so we're kind of taking the Dream Architect, which is our wealth management process, and then we're expanding that to create the Dream Architect Life, which then solves not only the wealth management, but these 4 other pillars. And it's not me doing it. I'm just collaborating with lots of people from around the world to bring in their expertise in these 4 other areas and putting together an immersive event, and then it'll be on video and whatnot also. But just because I haven't seen it done. So I guess, wanting to provide more or solving additional problems is probably the answer.
No, I applaud you because, like I said, it's like, I hang out with a lot of entrepreneurs, and it seems like by the time they get a certain way down the path, particularly if it's been a successful way down the path, it's hard to get them to, think about doing more. it seems like they want to think about doing less or.
I'm very fortunate. I have got great teams behind me. So I get to spend my days really just doing things that I enjoy. And I guess you would call it your unique abilities, using a Dan Sullivan term.
Yeah.
And so, that stuff just gives me energy. So I do very little in the big picture of things, but I'm more the visionary. And then we've got great people that actually implement all of it. And so I think when you can do that, then, you're not ever bogged down by the stuff that you don't enjoy. And every day is something new and fun and exciting. And you look forward to getting up to see what, more progress you can make.
I like to call that an options, not obligations life.
Yeah.
Options,
I like
not
that.
obligations.
I might steal that if you don't mind. That's great.
Yeah. Go ahead. I didn't trademark it or anything, but I think I did make it up, but it's open source. So feel free to
Well said.
take that. So I want to, just a sort of foundational question here. And that is, when you're into life insurance and you decide you want to, for various reasons, you decide you want to, go into the, I don't know if you would call it wealth advising at that point, or you call it retirement planning specialist. What did you call it then?
I would say more investment planning.
Investment planning.
Yeah, at that point, then it kind of is gradually evolved. But yeah, it's more investments.
And what gave you the confidence, Bryan, to go that way? Like, was it the education, or I'm always thinking to myself, well, man, before someone has, you're young, you're getting started. I know when I was young and getting started, I had a 401k plan and I had some other stuff, but I wouldn't have been confident helping someone else, put a roadmap together for their investing. And I'm wondering where that confidence came from for you.
Yeah, well, when I was in the life insurance industry, the one thing I did find out is I worked for a specific insurance company. And, as you got more knowledge, I just came to find out that they didn't have the best product for every situation I, came across. And so one of the things that it, ultimately told me is I need to be independent, because I'm actually working for my clients, not a particular company. And so the reason I also got out of the life insurance is you really sometimes didn't have any control over whether you could help people or not. Because if they needed life insurance, but they applied and they couldn't get it, then, you were no further down the line in helping them than when you started. So I found, just kind of a little bit through trial and error, the investment thing, I had a lot more control over. Everybody wanted to save money for, retirement or college educations or whatever. I found I enjoyed it and, just gravitated more towards the things I could control, and then just wanted to make sure that I could always represent the product or service that ultimately, was best for the client, because if I wanted to keep them, I needed to make sure that I was always looking out for their best interests.
Got it. Okay. And in your most recent book, which is Dare to Dream, right?
Actually, I do have a more recent one that just came out a couple of months ago, called Dream Architecture.
Dream Architecture. Okay. So, well, I haven't seen that one, so thank you for mentioning that. But in Dare to Dream, you wrote that with Brittany, I believe, and you, as I mentioned before, the subtitle is Design the Retirement You Can't Wait to Wake Up To. And in that book, you cover 10 costly retirement mistakes. And I remember one thing I read somewhere, which I don't know if this is in the book, but it was something like people spend more time planning their vacation than they do planning their retirement, which is, kind of a funny thing to say, but it's not a funny thing really. Right.
Yeah.
And so before I ask you to share a couple of mistakes, what is the mentality that people fear in your experience, where they would spend a lot of time planning a vacation for 7 days or something, but they will not spend much time planning their life I mean, not even after they retire, but up and until, and then after.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is, say, retirement, for example, is, a considerable ways into the future.
Too far. Okay.
Too far for some
Yeah.
people. And there's a lot of mentality of, like more like the instant gratification. So, if I'm going to take a vacation, well, maybe that's 3 months from now or 6 months from now. So I can, plan for that, and I'll worry about something that's 30 years from now, down the road. And so I just think it's people not understanding the benefits, because, if you just ever looked at the math, if you start at a really young age and then you just let your money compound, you'll probably make more the last 2 years of compounding than, say, the 28 years you did prior to that, because of the effects of compounding interest. And it's just kind of an amazing scenario. But I would say that's probably, just off the top of my head, the biggest thing is just, more instant gratification. I can get buy this or go on this trip. And since I've got time, I'll just, worry about that down the road.
And how it seems so, I mean, I get both of those things, but it seems it's almost like ignoring your health until you're, dying, and then go, oh crap,
Yeah.
now what? Right.
Yeah. Well, and really well said. I mean, one of the new pillars in the Dream Architect life is health and longevity. And, so that is one thing that people do, tend to not worry about and just take for granted, when, if you were a little more proactive on lots of different things, the results would be a lot different.
Right. So besides not doing it, not planning for it, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you talk about in the book, and how do you help people?
I think the biggest one for sure that everybody can relate to is taxes. And what I mean by that is maybe two things. One, there is this propensity to say, what can I be doing today to pay the lowest amount of income taxes possible? And in theory, that makes lots of sense. But the problem with it is that, just to give you a little example, if you were, say, in the 12% bracket and you had, another $10,000 or $20,000 of income, or, withdrawals that you could take to keep in the 12% bracket, but since you didn't want to pay any taxes on any additional money, you decided not to, fully fund the 12% bracket. What can happen is then that money accumulates, and then you got to pay taxes, down the road when you retire, or you have these required minimum distributions. And so it's just been almost mind-boggling to see, if you do the proper planning, how much over a long period of time you can save if you're willing to just follow a couple of different rules in the initial years. And that's just been probably the biggest one. And then the second biggest one, as it maybe relates to taxes, is when people do get to retirement, the distribution planning is 90% of the skill set that I would say us as a firm has, because accumulating money is really pretty easy. Put it in certain things, just let it sit there, yada, yada, yada. But the distribution is by far the most challenging thing. And what people do that, maybe don't work with somebody like us, is they'll just haphazardly take money out of whatever at the time that they need money. And, they could get extra Social Security subject to tax. They could, bump up to what they have to pay for Medicare. And all of a sudden, they go, well, I thought I'd only have to pay tax on this $10,000, but, they had 10,000 more Social Security tax. They jumped up another bracket in Medicare. And that was another, $300 and some a month that they have to pay for the next 2 years. So there's all sorts of little issues that, one, I don't think people, understand them or know that they're there, but that's why you really want to work with somebody that looks at all those details and says, what do you need to be doing today? But does that decision affect what you're going to do down the road? And then giving you the choice as to, would you rather pay a little extra tax today to avoid, extra taxes later on? Because I don't think we're ever going to probably be in a lower tax bracket environment than we are right today. And so if you can do things to pay less tax today, seems like the government always needs more money and more money and more money. And, they talk about, the people that have more, and they use the word 400,000 a lot for, an income bracket, but ultimately everybody pays more in tax in some way, shape, or form. Because if they don't pay more in tax, their goods and services that they buy probably are going up in cost, and indirectly that might be considered a tax that everybody has to pay.
So not all money is created equal. In other words, there are a lot of unintended consequences to how you move or spend money that you may not see if you're not working with someone who's got the whole picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally amazing. We've had several cases where just the proper planning has literally saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in income tax, over somebody's lifetime. And if you don't need the money yourself, wouldn't you rather control where it went? So if you want to give it to charity, instead of the government or whatever, I would rather have the client have that choice than make it mandatory that they have to pay the extra tax.
And I've heard a lot of stories about people who sold their businesses and didn't have the proper planning in place before the transaction took place, and really ended up regretting. Just a short break here to ask you a question. Have you read my book? It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck, and it's available on Amazon, Audible, and everywhere else. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download your very own copy today. I mean, and not just regretting it, but regretting it with a big check or lots of checks, not having done the planning before. I mean, so the lesson too is like, it's not just about saving, but if you're going to come into money for any reason in your life, you really need to be looking or have someone looking at what that means and what you can do prior to getting it that, could save you a ton of money, a ton of headache, a ton of just making a mistake. Like you said, I just thought it was $10,000. Well, it was $10,000 then. Now it's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Mike, so true. And if you take like one of the biggest mistakes that you can make if you're a business owner is exactly what you said. Because typically a business is a person's biggest asset. And a couple of things happen there. Most business owners have never sold a business.
Right.
So they don't even know, how to value it or what it's worth. And most business owners take, maybe 50 or 100% less than it's actually probably worth. And there's an interesting term that a lot of people use where they say, most businesses have Rembrandts in the closet. And so, just trying to find out what's that little secret sauce that you have that makes your business worthwhile. And so I couldn't agree more. If you own a business and you're, 5 years from retirement, you really want to work with some specialists that know what things do you need to do in advance of selling the business to make it look the best? And then just what are all the ramifications tax-wise and other that you need to be aware of, because lots of things can go wrong if you've never done it before. It's just like, if you're going to do surgery, would you hire, the top surgeon, or would you do the surgery yourself? Well, obviously you're not going to do the surgery yourself.
Right.
And when you're dealing with your biggest asset, probably don't, you want to minimize the number of mistakes. At least I would.
Yeah. But yeah, it's weird because you do see it happen all the time.
Yeah.
People, when someone puts a number in front of your face, sometimes you just get fixated on that number and you're like, oh my gosh, that's too good to be true. I don't want to
Yeah.
lose that. So I'll just like full speed ahead, but
Yeah.
without doing like what you said, which.
Yeah. Well, there's a gentleman we collaborate with who's got an interesting story, and that he specializes in helping business owners, um, you know, do the right thing prior to sale. And he was going to sell his business for 7 figures, and then that just didn't seem right. So then he didn't sell it, and he really started digging into what are all the proper things. And later on, 2 years later, sold it for 9 figures.
Is that Jeffrey Felberg?
Jeffrey Feldberg. Yeah.
Oh,
So we
okay.
work with Jeffrey. Do you know Jeffrey?
Oh, yeah. I had him. He's been on the show.
Has he?
I was
Yeah.
on his show as well. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Small world.
Yeah, really a small world, but he's got so many great tips. And so Jeffrey helps us with our clients, and we like to send him through his 90-day process. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. I'm glad we can make that connection between the.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of things I'd like to talk about before we end here. The first is this. In your bio, it says living the life of his dreams. And then, as I mentioned before, you've got dream in the architecture, you've got dream in the book titles. And so I have 2 questions, Bryan. One is, how do you know when you're living the life of your dreams? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, how do you get people in the thinking about what is actually a dream for them when it comes to their planning for the rest of their life with your firm or any other firm for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think a dream is a very personalized thing, and I would tell you that my quick version of it is doing what you want with who you want when you want. And that is kind of a dream, if you will. One of the things that is really noticeable to me, but it's very tough to have these conversations. But if you go back when you're a little kid and you're growing up, and you just think back of any young kid, even today or when you were young, we all wanted to be astronauts and firemen, and we all had these grandiose, dreams of, what we could be and what we could do. And I don't know exactly what happens, whether it's school or life or whatnot, but all of a sudden you get all these pressures and people saying, "Oh, wow, what are you thinking of doing there? That's really silly. You can't do that." And you start getting all these naysayers that start, shooting on you, if you will. You shouldn't do that, and you shouldn't be this. And I think it just kills the creativity of most people. So, when we bring up the topic, it is usually pretty foreign to most people to go, "Whoa, that's kind of woo-woo stuff here." And, but, we just have a series of questions that we like clients to go through. A lot of times it's, we'll have them take it home, and we call them over dinner discussions, where, if you're looking for a conversation with your spouse about, what you want your life to be in the future, here's some questions you should start asking each other and writing down the answers. And then when we get together, let us know what you're thinking. Because all we're trying to do is just get people to think a little bigger. Because I have just found, and this is just me, whatever you think about seems to actually happen. And whether you think positive things or negative things, you'll get those results. So if you start thinking about, big possibilities, and that's what you constantly remind yourself. So I'm a big, journaling guy, and I like to read my goals daily, because if it's front of mind, all of a sudden, gee, this pops up that is the answer to something that I'm working for. But consequently, if you're in there, I can't do this, or this is negative, well, that stuff will appear in your life also.
Hmm.
And so the reason we wrote the second book, Dream Architecture, is we realized that that should have been the first book, because it's all about the intersection of mindset and money. And Dare to Dream was all about the dream architect process. And so we totally missed all the things in the framework that clients need to think through and understand to help them live the dream life.
Yeah.
And so that's the nature of that that book. And just a little trial and error. You just don't realize it at the time. But so that in the sequence of things, we would have our clients read Dream Architecture first, then Dare to Dream.
Got it. Yeah, I imagine I was trying to imagine sitting around the dinner table, and you call them dinner table conversations, because those aren't even when you tell to someone to dream, it's still like what you said about Dick, that he believed in you more than you believed in yourself. And people, I think, when it comes to their own dreaming, feel the same way. Like they need to be prompted. And I bet you have a bunch of questions that prompt people too about, how they, it's not just about, do I have enough money to survive once I'm not getting a check anymore, right?
And I think it's my role and our team's role is to be the encourager or the inspirer, that, you could do that. Yeah, that's possible, instead of, somebody that's always telling them no. And I just had a really crazy experience the other day. I was at a close friend's funeral, and so we were having a little celebration afterwards, and a bunch of people were together, and this young lady comes up to me, and we were having a conversation. I hadn't seen her for a while, and she had been through a bout of cancer. And I forgot until she reminded me, but she came up and grabbed me, and we went off into a corner, and she said, "Bryan, I just wanted to thank you, because if you remember, when I had my cancer, you sent me a note that said, you must have a lot of other good things to accomplish in your life, so you're meant to be here," or something to that effect. And she's doing fine now. She's cancer-free, but she has never forgot that. And so just that little bit of encouragement was, I almost got to tears when she said that, because I was just trying to be, helpful and kind and send her a little encouragement note. But, she apparently took that a little bit differently. And then at one of our EWAS conferences, a guy came up, and he was fighting cancer. And he said, "Bryan, I just wanted to let you know, I'm a big listener of your podcast. And one of the things that got me through cancer was just your positive attitude and your perception on life. And, you just don't know how you're going to affect people. But just those two little things were, I was just doing my podcast, and I was just, what did it take me? 15 seconds to write a note to this lady. But, if you can be an encourager, and anybody can do this, if you can be a positive force in anybody's life and point out the good and don't point out the bad, and you'll have this amazing impact. Plus, you're going to get a lot out of it. And that's a really great thing.
I like that. Be a positive force. And what was so interesting about that too is I'll bet you that, because I know this has happened to me a lot of times. I like to write notes too.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember that I've written a note, and someone mentions it, and then like she did with you. And it's like, wow, that note, because a lot of things you do in life to be positive, for example, they don't get recognized, right? People don't be like, "Oh, that was awesome." They just, you. So when it does happen, you think, "Oh my gosh, this is worth it. This is good," right? It's done something good for someone.
Yeah. And, I think it's just, if you can just get in the habit of doing that more often, and, it just takes a little bit of time. If once a day you wrote a positive note to somebody and sent it to them, whether it's a friend or somebody going through a rough patch, and just give them a little encouragement, what did it take you? 30 seconds?
Right. Be a positive force. Bryan, I think that's a good spot to end. I do want to promote your podcast. I did not do that at the beginning. You said you do 2 podcasts?
Yeah, we have the Dream Architect Life podcast, which is for just literally anybody. And we try to be, the intersection of mindset and money, and have some real positive guests on. And then Brittany, that you've had on as one of your guests, her and I do the podcast. And then we have, for financial advisors, we have the Ultimate Advisor podcast. I know we've done 180 episodes or something with that one, but the Dream Architect Life is relatively new. I think we've recorded like 30 of them.
Okay. Well, nice. 2 podcasts. I love it. And both serving a different sort of demographic, I guess. So thanks. I'll make sure that goes into the show notes.
I appreciate that.
Sweetfinancial.com, Bryan Sweet, Bryan. Is there anything that I haven't asked you or that you would like to leave everyone with, Bryan, before we sign off?
No, this has just been so enjoyable, Mike, and just wanted to thank you for having me as your guest.
Well, thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed getting to know you a bit. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and likewise.